Thank you for joining me for this rune reading focused on the UK political leadership picture between the dates of the 1st of October and the 1st of May. I should perhaps begin by explaining that this is very different to my mediumship work that I do in spiritualist churches. With that, I communicate with spirit people, loved ones that have passed over, and give evidence of who they are, details of their lives, etc. And yes, we of course touch upon the life of the person who has come for the reading. But it is very different to this. We're not really with that looking at what their future might be, although sometimes there is, encouragement, ideas of possibilities. But with this, we are looking at the future. And I always say it is a potential future because we have to wait and see how things turn out, although the runes are usually pretty accurate. And I also work with intuition. I am the author of Runes and Rainbows, which is very much about my way of reading the runes, and the meanings that I work with are set out in this book. But I also when I work with the runes with people rather than a situation. I also have the option of doing Runes and Rainbows, which is my way of working, which incorporates information from chakras and also the universal energies. And with that, I am working intuitively as well, but the runes will form the framework. And here the runes form the framework, and there are some intuitions that came in. I was very much guided by intuition on the points that I wanted to work with, the points in time. I always go with that. If it's a person having a reading, obviously we sit down and we look at the area that we want the reading to cover. If it is a rune reading, if it is a mediumship reading, then that wouldn't be relevant. But with rune readings, that's what we do. With a situation, I feel it's necessary to set the frame in place to work from so that there are frames of reference. But I also, with setting that frame in place, I use my intuition. So I'm now going to move on to the next slide, if that wants to happen. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get them to move on. I don't know why. We're started now. So this is the different phases that I wanted to look at. The first one was this October, which has a general theme in both the Tory and the Labour parties of more being in disarray, more chaotic, and also more ups and downs in everyday life and difficulties in a way to be responded to. At the beginning of this time, October, I feel that there are the seeds of a new faction or party, or even a party sown within the Labour Party. I also feel that an overall theme is that UK people, regardless of which party they favour, whether it's the Tory party, the Labour Party, the Green Party or something else, that they are becoming increasingly polarised and angry really at the way things are going, or more so perhaps not going. The next point in time that I wanted to read for was November to February. And I felt that changes of key players in the Tory party especially would be a big feature during this time. And that even if they have a change of leader, which I think is quite possible, it's not going to be seen as enough. So at this time, the dissatisfaction of the people increases. And it's during this time that the new faction within the Labour Party emerges strongly, and also that there is a great force in favour of a general election. And I haven't exactly got clear on whether there will be one, but I think everything that I've looked at is pointing towards that, to a general election, probably not before Christmas, but I could feel definitely the push for one building within that time scale. Of course, we're not due another general election anywhere near yet, so it would be ahead of schedule. March, April, I felt there was a little bit more of a settling down stage. Change seems to have been positive, and then at that time there is also the need to increasingly work on adjustments to international system changes which come from outside the UK. I feel that this is, Brexit may touch upon it, but I feel that this is different to Brexit. So, and with that, I feel the 1st of May is pivotal. But the overall theme of these times is, in a way, chaos and difficulty paves the way to necessary changes and better choices and options. So that has got to be something that feels good. But to come back to the runes, I picked 3 runes for October 21, as I did for the other time periods. And the quick summary is we have Thursaz, power and defense, consideration of the rightfulness of actions, the forces used, and the fairness of impositions is all invited to be up for consideration. These are all aspects to look at, and also the fact that many will say the ground that we are walking on needs to change. In other words, the foundation of the approach needs to be different. And also when this rune falls this way, because I read them differently depending how they fall, we are also talking about an unwillingness to undertake different options, even when those would be helpful. There is a certain stubbornness here, and in many ways a lack of looking forwards from the current leadership. Othila, also known as Othel, some call it Odin's rune, is very much about the roots with the past, traditions, inheritance, land, law, and also family histories. But no rune really could better be said to represent the traditional values of the Tory party. So I was really pleased when that one fell in the centre, because it kind of confirmed for me that I was on track. But when Othila falls this way, it represents a detachment from the roots in many ways. If I see this in a person's reading, they are detached quite often. Quite often they've moved from their homeland, or there's a branch that has fallen off the family tree that feels quite important to them. So there is a break from the past in a way, but also with this, in this position, there is a loss of power, a loss of support, and there's also an indication of legal challenges. Again, if this was a person, it would raise the question of, can they exactly proceed, as they would like to? Is that going to be possible? And then we have Sorolo, or Sol, which literally means the sun. Sol means the sun. And this is the warmth and benevolence and the happy influences. And this in a way mitigates, to some extent, the difficulties and the unpleasantness that are indicated by the other 2 runes, that during the politically hard times of winter also kinder processes and ideas are being built behind the scenes. And there is a lot of work going on in different ways outside of the current leadership, I have to say, I feel, that is positive, that bodes well. So we must remember here that it isn't all doom and gloom, even though some may start to look at the news and think, well, it's going to hell in a handcart. Yes, there's a certain amount of chaos, but then sometimes chaos is about the breakdown that allows for breakthrough, that allows for change. And I see it more as a coming apart, of that which does not need to be. And before that can happen, it has to be held up in sharp focus. It's a bit like standing in front of a mirror and, you know, really taking a look rather than just glancing in a mirror and maybe not noticing that we've got lipstick on our teeth or something. So that is how I saw October. But to move on here to the way I'm applying it and some intuitions as well, I saw increasing upheavals within both the Conservative and Labour parties. It just seems to be with both parties. I think possibly more so with the Conservative Party, but not a lot of difference really. And I feel also Tory leadership's policy changes and reversals are, you know, increasing greatly. And also that the Chancellor is feeling quite pressurised, as though everything is coming at him from all different angles, which can't be a nice thing to experience. I also feel that with the some Tories in high places, obviously only a few, there's going to be a little bit of embarrassing finance related information again, whether this is due to expenses or whether it's just due to the enormously difference between how some people have to live. I don't know, but I can see this coming up, and quite a lot of anger and searching questions. And again, I feel evasive answers. And the thing that makes people angry is the lack of censure with this. So I feel that the anger of the UK people towards the Tory leadership, I felt that quite strongly, increases due to more dismissals of their everyday difficulties, of, you know, those being treated in a flippant way, or, you know, you can do this, you can do that to solve the problem, and it's not something that would be realistic for, you know, for hardly anyone to do that in their situation. That kind of thing is what I'm talking about. And I also feel that their situations worsened by recent approaches, and worst of all, that people that are not necessarily on the bottom, but, you know, maybe in the bottom third of society, I hate to express it that way, but in an economic terms, in the bottom third, I feel people will be feeling that, you know, there's a lot that's been treated with contempt. And if it isn't them that is affected, then it is their you know, their brother, sister, friend, or neighbour that is in a harder position. That's what I want to say. But then there's something here that is positive and exciting. I feel that there will be the beginnings of a new faction emerging within the Labour Party, with maybe pressure for a new party even. But if there is a new party, this doesn't feel totally separate. So it makes it hard for me to say whether this is a new party or just a new element or a new faction. But this is in its very early stages. So it might not manifest publicly until after October, maybe not until November. But I was very conscious that this was something that was kind of coming up, and that felt, you know, different and new. And for my own political alignments, I'm actually probably closer to the Green Party than anything else. In the past, there have been Tory governments I've liked. I don't like this one, I must be honest. And I also feel, you know, that the Labour Party at the moment, I don't feel it's as good as it could be. Let's put it like that. So I do have a little bit of a bias in there, so I'm just expressing that. But then my next runes I chose, the next area I wanted to read for, was the segment of time between November 21 and February 22. And to go to the runes that I chose Awaz, which is the strength to focus strongly on a goal. I often use a different name for this rune that it's also well known by, Ur. And that rune is about horse. The ancient meaning of that is related to horses. And if you imagine in the olden days taking a long journey on horseback and planning that, you'd have to think, is it worth using the energy of the horse? Where will the horse eat and drink, and so on? So it's about aiming for the target, using discernment, making the best use of resources. And another name for this rune is Ehel or Eel, which means yew, the wood that was very much prized by the longbow makers of England. And of course, defining the best targets and using skillful craftsmanship are very important in political situations. So the meaning is not lost here, whichever name you relate to, whichever way you source meaning from it. And it does show that these skills are lacking a little bit, and that to me is indicated by the rune in the center of this row, which is Mane or Malva. And it shows that it's the human values factor that is lacking, because to come to Mane, it's about humanity, helpfulness, and destiny in its simplest terms. And in this orientation, it does show the failure to prioritize and handle these things well. And that is obviously a detriment to the present leadership. But coming on to the third rune, that forms almost a partnership, that the rune on the right and the rune on the left form a partnership with one another, with the rune in the middle showing what the weakness of that partnership is, which is the lack of consideration of human needs in a way. But Tevas or Tyr, Tyr is the Norse god who sacrificed his right arm in the fight against Fenrir, the giant wolf in Norse mythology. And it's all about using that strong, direct warrior power. But we have to decide whether the trade-offs will be worth it of using that power and the extent to which we want to use it. And in this case, ignoring social situations and values places the current leadership in trouble. It actually places, I feel, in jeopardy. But we will come to that a little bit later on, that aspect. So let's move on once again. Here we are. So this is what I made of the rune interpretations and also some intuitions that came to bear on that. More changes of key players, principally in the Tory party, and rapid policy changes are very confusing and feel shambolic. There's this feeling if you don't know whether you're on foot, horseback or riding a bicycle with them, because things change so much. And the opinion at this time will be that a change of leadership would not be enough, and that there will be, I feel, strong pressure for a general election, and that pressure is quite powerful. So the dissatisfaction of the people is further increased, and those concerns are still being handled in a manner that is seen as dismissive, derogatory, unrelated to reality, and a bit insulting. I also feel on a different tack entirely, the Chancellor is asked some direct questions about what hasn't been revealed concerning the country's financial status quo over the last year or a little bit more, really during the time of COVID. But I don't feel that we're talking about what's been done by this Chancellor. We're talking a little bit about what has happened before as well. But of course, he is the one that is required to do his best to answer those questions. So I feel that that's around as well. But to come to more hopeful things, especially for those that feel that they're on the bottom, they're struggling financially, and that there's all sorts of, let's face it, there's lots of people that are struggling for various reasons, and a lot of them, they will put the blame for that at the feet of the government, really. But sometimes it's not 100% their fault, but they do make choices that work for better or worse. But this new element within Labour that I've talked about, I feel it is getting stronger, and it's becoming visible. And that regardless of the name that they choose for themselves, the banner they choose to march under, I feel that they regard themselves as true Labour, with the traditional values of Labour. And, that is what they are holding firm to. I feel that a strong-minded young woman and also other younger politicians become prominent here. That's not to say that older people are excluded, but I do feel it's a little bit more youth, the force of youth, if I can put it like that, but very open to anybody that is youthful in attitude, that has the concerns of the younger generations, close to their heart, as well as the concerns of their own generation, and the one that is older than them. But whether this is a new party or a group who take over in Labour and direct more of the Labour policies so that it evolves more, I am definitely seeing strong links with other minority parties. And if this is a new party, I would say they've got strong links with the existing Labour Party. But that, it sounds odd, I know, but it is something that I am feeling here. And in a way, it's about putting the needs of people first. That is a strong part of it. And I also feel that preparations are in place that are going to bring change, maybe not yet, but in not very, months, a short months rather than a long time, because that's what I'm seeing here, that there will be a new leader coming into office. Now, whether that is just a new leader within the new party or the new Labour Party or whatever it's called, or Labour if it changes, or whether it is a new leader that then becomes Prime Minister, I am not sure at this point, but I believe there are a few clues later on in this reading as to that. So I'm going to move on a little bit now. And now we're in the final phase that I am reading for today, which is March, April to the 1st of May. And I will come to the special reason why I included the 1st of May, because it felt really significant. That's the reason why. But to come back to these runes, Gebel or Gyev, I often say is give yourself a gift in the form of a decision if we're talking to a person. It's about that, but it's also about the qualities of words of honour, oath, commitment in response to a decision. And of course, when we decide something, we give our commitment to it. This rune will also quite often show up if somebody is getting married, if somebody is committing themselves to a new career pathway, if somebody is signing a major contract as well, which could be for a house or something like that. It will often show up in the reading, but equally it can be an inner commitment, a person that decides that they're going to, for example, follow Buddhism. Well, that is their inner and heartfelt commitment. And this rune will show that kind of commitment too. But that's not what it is showing in this reading. This is literally about the commitments that are made by politicians, and we would say quite often, wouldn't we, that they are broken, or they have been fairly often. But this is also about somebody who goes into it with a big sense of honour, a big sense of commitment. So there is lesser chance of that. And at the heart centre of this reading, we've got the rune answers or answer. The word answer comes from the Old Indo-European word answaru, which gives us the English word answer, and also the Icelandic word svara, which means to reply or respond. So the meaning is pretty similar. But this is saying that also the problems that are there that politicians are having to grapple with, and that, they are considerable. They invite answers, and it's better to see them that way. But also with this new commitment, there is a daring to be bold, to use creative solutions, to transform situations for the better, to really look for what the solutions could be, and the best that could be. And I see that as being something that is at the heart of this time, March, April to the 1st of May. And at what point the leadership changes during this time, I am not so sure. But I'm going to say that the key is in Gebo and the oath or the commitment in response to a decision made within the party, a decision made by the people, perhaps in a general election, if that were to happen. But I also feel, my intuition is this is not a Tory leader. If it is a Tory party Conservative leader, then it is a very different kind of Conservative leader. That's all I can say. But it's a leader that wants to pursue different answers, that has at the heart of their being the willingness to look at people as a whole and not to differentiate too much between the needs, not to devalue the needs of those at the bottom. That's the best way I can explain it. That, it can't be utopia for obvious reasons, but those needs are taken more seriously, and equality as a concept is taken more seriously. Equality between the different levels of society, not just between gender or orientation, but in other ways too. So we then have the only rune here that is a little bit of I would say a slowdown factor. That's the best way I can describe it in this reading. Dagas or Daga, the new day. And it does support happy new starts. But when it falls this way so that it looks like an egg timer, there is a slowing down. There is often a delay before that new start can come in. And there can also be harder effort required to make that new start go as well as it can. So you're battling to push it forwards. I say, it's a bit like the difference between if you're riding on horseback and you've got a different horse that is carrying all your things, you can just ride. But if you've got one horse and that horse can only carry your possessions and you've got to walk alongside, well, it's slower and it's harder, but you can still get there. You can still reach your destination. And that's how I feel that Dagas in the reverse position is operating in this reading. And my intuition as to what is slowing it down took me to the 1st of May. And with that date, I just have the strongest feeling of systemic changes that will originate outside of the UK, but the UK has to adapt to them. And this really is, the change is centred around the 1st of May. And this has got to have attention, but also boldness and creativity of response can make a difference here too. So now let's move on. And, for me, this is the key to me saying that there's a new Prime Minister should be coming between March, April and the 1st of May, because Gebo really delivered the strongest indication of a new leader being sworn in if that is the correct term in England. I don't know whether that is the term we use, but there is a formality and a commitment that takes place. And this is what I'm talking about. And this would apply, I feel, even if during the winter there was a change of Tory leader. If the leadership changed, if the Prime Minister changed, there would still, I'm still seeing this further change of a new leader between March, April and the 1st of May, but probably before the 1st of May. And I would expect a lot of hope to be generated and a sense of honour and commitment to a part of the values that are associated with the incoming Prime Minister, because I feel that very strongly. And there is then a settling down and applying a strong sense of direction to get to a grip on the disarray of the recent past. And that feels simultaneous. You're kind of dealing with the debris of the past and trying to work forwards at the same time and making progress. But that's another reason for me using the horse carrying the possessions and the person that who would really like to be riding that horse, to be walking alongside it. But because that fits there as well. There are many hurdles to overcome, but creative solution seeking and positive decision making. The style is refreshing. And I feel, as I've already said, it feels much more inclusive, feels quite respectful as well. But around this period, especially April, as I've already said, it incorporates the need to work on adaptation to some changes in international systems around the key date of the 1st of May that does have some impact. And I can't really get much on this other than the fact that it was it was a very strong impression, but then I couldn't get anything on it. And this does happen sometimes when we're perhaps not meant to know, not because something is bad, because we might not understand it in the current context or something like that. But I didn't feel really that it was Brexit, post-Brexit related. There might be some interaction with that, but I felt it was something else that was a bit wider. And I did feel there was a finance aspect. So maybe having to adapt to different frameworks or something like that. But there's some work that needs to be done on that. And in its own way, that is a new chapter. And it did definitely feel like a new chapter. Now, before I finish, I want to say this reading is for entertainment purposes only. And the events referred to, although the runes are very good, are the potential future, because we always have to wait and see how life turns out. That is something that is exciting. And of course, in a personal reading, we often get different pathways that people can take or not, and that is exciting too. But it doesn't really come up in this kind of reading in that way. So thank you for joining me today. I very much appreciate your company. And if you're interested in my book, Runes and Rainbows, you can obtain it from Amazon. It's obtainable in both Kindle and paperback form.